I have a special tradition that I started on the podcast, and it's been so popular. Hi, everyone. I'm so glad that you're here at the end of 2021. I learned from successful, inspiring people, and I know that many of you do too, based on what you've told me about my guests. I started this year by asking everyone their favorite tool or tip for productivity, and their answers are worth taking note of. These are experts, top authors, doctors, industry leaders. My wonderful podcast producer, Simona, and I have put together a compilation of their answers about productivity. And those of you who have listened since I started the podcast in early 2021 know that I left a wild career as a TV anchor. In fact, that was my job for 28 years. My days turned into nights. My nights, they were sleepless. I called it the hamster wheel, where I got up to do a 4.5-hour morning show when it was dark, early, 2:30 in the morning. I wrote stories for the late news after the show was over. And then I turned into super mom, or at least that's what I told myself. But I found myself starting each day with a sense of sadness. And I ran that hamster wheel over and over again. And we know how important it is to be productive, right? It's important, and we want more time out of our day, but it's not a replacement for health and wellness and happiness and time with your family. In fact, my tip for all of you for productivity is to take time for yourself. When you're feeling healthy, you're going to be more productive. So that's my tip as you set your goals. Think through the things that really give you joy. And I promise doing more of those things will make you more productive. If you want more tips like this from me, be sure to subscribe to my newsletter, which you can do by using the link in the episode show notes. I send a note out each week that's packed with tips to help you in the parenting, mindset, and health departments. Okay, so on with the clips from my experts this year. We're going to start with my friend, Dr. Cheryl Ziegler, from the very first episode of the podcast. I have interviewed Dr. Z so many times through the years, but those interviews, they used to be very short on morning TV. Our conversation on the podcast was refreshing, and it was her tip on productivity that really got me thinking, and when I started this tradition. So listen in while she talks about loving yourself and doing things just for you.
So I have two that just come to mind. The first one is my Peloton. And I say that because not necessarily that it's the workout part. It's the fact that I stop and I could be doing other things, but I say, I am worth this time. I put on my favorite, instructor. I usually do it 20 minutes, but sometimes 20, 30. I never go past 30. And what it is for me is it's a mental health break. It is just like, boom, it's the middle of the day. Things feel like a lot, or, I've got an hour till I have to go get the kids. I'm just going to have mental health breaks. So really, truly, some sort of, you can do whatever you want. Quiet time, meditation, mental health break, that walk, but just that 20 or 30 minutes every day. Sometime I do it in the middle of the day. It's not the same time every day, but it's sometime usually between 11 and 1. I just take 20 to 30 minutes for myself. That's huge for me. And the second thing that's recent for me that I've been loving that I want to share with other people is it's funny. It's like I'm in transition. So I'm doing kind of both. I'm not going to say I'm perfect with this, but I heard somebody speak and say, no longer make to-do lists. Don't make to-do lists. Put whatever you're supposed to do, write it right into your schedule. And I'm like, oh, this is a great idea, right? So I kind of am in transition. So I'm doing both. I'll have a to-do list, but then I take my to-do list and I plug it into my week.
Wow.
At 55, I'm going to run to the post office. On Monday at 2, I'm going to go food shopping, whatever it is. And all of a sudden I'm like, this is so awesome. This is great. It feels like I'm way more in control of my schedule, because if it's on that to-do list, it means it has to be done. And then I just find a time to do it.
Next, a New York Times bestselling author, Rachel Greenwald. She's a relationship expert, and Rachel is so fun to talk to. I feel better about myself every time I talk to her. And her tip is something that you might not expect.
Okay, well, I'm going to say something that I don't know if it's considered a tool, but I consider it a tool. It's a 2-letter tool, and the letters are NO. Saying no is the best productivity tool that has served me well. I think that we are so inclined, especially as women, to say yes to things and then end up regretting it. And your productivity goes down because you're simply overcommitted. So, let's start with the most basic and simple thing you can do. It's free, and it is so liberating to say no to the things that you don't love, and that even if you think that you might love something, but you're overscheduled, saying no and letting go to something gives you back your sanity. So that's what I would say.
Best advice. I love that so much. I can't tell you, I'm guilty of that, feeling like I need to say yes, but learning to say no. That was Rachel Greenwald in episode number 8 from the podcast. Saying no is one of those really hard things for people, but I've started to take this into account, and I hope that you will too, before maybe you agree to that lunch or a call or a meeting. And think about what you could say that would actually be okay and would give you the time that you need. Maybe it's just a phrase like, I can't take the time for that right now, but let's talk again in the future. Next, episode number 2, and Dr. Michael Snyder. Every time I talk to Dr. Snyder, and I've known him for years as well, I come away with so many ideas and I feel motivated. He is a weight loss doctor, but he's about so much more than that. He has a relationship with his patients that really is unmatched. One of the stories that I remember from him was Dr. Snyder telling me about a patient, a male patient that lost hundreds of pounds, and he was taking all kinds of steps to improve himself, especially after he lost that weight, because he had lost so much of his self-esteem. And he called Dr. Snyder and said, I'm trying to just improve my self-image and I want to go get a pedicure. So being the kind man that Dr. Snyder is, he said, I'll go get a pedicure with you. And that's just who he is. So Dr. Snyder and his patient went to get pedicures, and he doesn't care what people think. He just cares about people. And his tip for productivity is motivated by his personal life. Here it is.
Well, it's interesting you asked me that, because everything in life you can screw up, I've kind of screwed up on some level. So this is the voice of experience. At the end of the day, the things that I thought needed to be more productive actually didn't matter. If I made a little bit more money, it didn't matter that much. I was fine even when I didn't make much. And if I had more stuff, it didn't make me happy. And if I was a little more accountable at work, it didn't make me happy. What really mattered was when I kept my home team happier. For me personally, if I come home and I drive home and I think like, how can I make my wife happy tonight? Like, what could I do that would be super nice to her that she'd say, well, he's great. Like that thought process. And I know you listening to this thinking like, wouldn't that be fun to do that? Like I try and do it all the time, having failed marriage before and done all that stuff. Like I'm kind of wired that I just want to be better. And the things I care about being better is being a better dad and being a better husband and trying to be nicer to people and my patients. And I don't joke about people anymore. Like I think I'm trying to become a better guy. After 57 years, I think I learned a couple lessons.
Next, another very successful author and now the head of a very successful company that helps moms get back into the workforce. Her name is Samantha Etta. She's a successful author, also a mom of 3. And we know how hard it is to manage all of that, trying to stay on top of work and be a mom. So Samantha gives us her top tip for staying organized, trying to do it all.
I'm going to hold up my notebook. I'm like a big pen and paper girl as much as I run a fintech company. I'm a big believer in making my to-do list the night before. In fact, last night I didn't do it and I woke up with a blank to-do list, and it's like scaring me because I'm so much more productive in the morning when I look at my list and I can hit the ground running. And so I'm always a fan of making your to-do list the night before. That's one of them. And then also I think in terms of productivity, like I believe in doing things fast. And I think that in terms of decision making, I make decisions fast. I think that the more you deliberate on a decision, there's no correlation between the strength of that decision and how much time you spend on it. So I'm a big believer in making decisions fast and moving on. And then if it was the wrong decision, you can fix that. But I don't think I spend a lot of time deliberating. I just don't have the time for it. I couldn't get things done if I spent a lot of time on every decision. So I just
learned to tune into your gut. From pen and paper to an author that has advice on using technology to be more productive, Julie Lythcott-Haynes has several books now, including one that really changed things for me as a mom. That's how I first found her. And that book is called How to Raise an Adult. Here's Julie's tip for productivity.
So a couple things are coming to mind. I'm going to pick one. I use the Google Calendar and I have my to-do list as a calendar. And so I keep my to-do list as an ongoing repeating calendar every day. And so I can go into today and I have little to do, big to do. So I can look at little to do, take care of a few tasks, hit save, and it'll say save for just now or save for the future. And I'm like, save for the future. That means the to-do list is automatically updated. I can access it on a plane. I can access it as long as I have cell coverage or Wi-Fi, I can see my to-do list. And so it's a way for me to be very productive in small moments. So it's like, I've got 15 minutes, I got 5 minutes, I got an hour. What do I need to take care of? And
I
it's
love that.
Yeah.
And I like you have a little to do, big to do.
Yeah.
Because sometimes my to do is like
Yeah.
a long to do, and some of them take an hour and some take 5 minutes.
Yeah. And I'm often asked to read other people's books and blurb them. And that could be a 20-hour task, depending on the length of the book. So those going big to do. I have to then schedule out time to make sure it gets done.
And another technology platform from a parenting expert is what I have for you next. In episode 22, I interviewed Amy McCready from Positive Parenting Solutions. Amy gave me so many excellent tips for working with kids of all ages. And she also has an online course for parents needing some extra support. Check that out. We're going to put it in the show notes. It is so good. So what does she use to keep her business and her personal life organized?
Oh my goodness. So first off, I struggle with productivity. Like I'm not one of those people that is just like super naturally organized. So I do need tools. And the one that I use, it is a technology platform, but it's Asana. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Okay.
A little bit here and there, but tell me how you use it.
One of my longtime friends, April Perry, her company is called Learn to Become. She teaches this process of using Asana to sort of prioritize your tasks. And so you put them into different buckets. So you would have a today list. I have like a, decisions pending things that I have to make decisions on, waiting on from others. So I know like I'm waiting on my team for certain things, so I don't forget about those. My current projects. And then I have a category for like someday projects, like great ideas that I have, but I can't execute on them now. So they're just different buckets. And then just every day looking at that list, and it really, and there's a list for like errands. So if you're out and you have 15 extra minutes, okay, what can I do? Or phone calls to make, there's a bucket for that. So I'm not explaining it well like she does, but basically it's like all those things that you have to do in your life or manage in your business. It's creating these systems within Asana that just kind of help you track it and stay on top of things. So you don't have like handwritten lists everywhere. And that works for some people.
But I like the buckets, like putting them in different categories allows you to not feel overwhelmed. If you have like one long to-do list, you're never going to get to all of them. Some of them can wait, or some of them can be done in little pockets of time. But the bucket system with Asana, I like that.
Yeah, it's really handy. Like you're waiting for you have in the parking lot 10 minutes before you have to go into your appointment. Okay, what calls can I make? I've got that bucket of all those calls I have to make. And it's just, it really works. So anyway, you can check in.
I like it. You are going to love this next tip. And what's really cool about this is it's something that I have been doing for years, but I never really identified it. And now I'm really in tune with it. So if you can think about this and do it, I think it'll help you in your productivity as well. In episode 12, I talked to Jill and David Henry together after coaching sports and teaching. They wrote a book called The Greatest College Health Guide You Never Knew You Needed. So Dave, in the podcast episode, talked about being productive and getting into a state of flow.
So the flow state is, I'm sure, something that you guys have had discussions on this podcast, and maybe not yet, but it's essentially you're finding this optimal experience where nothing else seems to matter, right? If you've ever been doing something and then you looked up and you're like, oh my God, 3 hours went by, right? You were in a flow state, okay? Well, that's essentially a hack for being the most productive you could ever be in your life, right? In that kind of moment. I can't turn that on and off. And so for me, I have to set the stage. I have to build the environment. I have to gather the goods. And if you have to write a paper, or, for me, if I have to cut a scene, I need to not only know what is this about, what are the emotions that are involved in this, I've got to go through all the footage and find every single piece that I can use to help fortify that. And then I've got to make sure that all of these things are available for me. And then I start a timer on my phone, and I'm not allowed to do anything else. But now that I have all the goods, I can just get right to it and I'm not going to do anything until that timer goes off. And that could be 20 minutes, that could be 45 minutes. It's up to you to decide how long. But if you treat it like a race, you don't just show up to a race and start running, right? You've got to like wake up and hydrate and eat something and get there and maybe stretch a little bit. Yeah. And then when that goes off, you know that it's time to do it because you've built up to that moment. So that's my hack for trying to get into the flow state, is knowing I can't just turn it on and off. I've got to like be ready for it. And then when it's time, commit to it. Nothing else, like no phone, no email, nothing. I'm going to just do this right now.
Do you recognize, Dave, this could be a whole podcast, and we haven't talked about that, but I love this. And I'm going to call it this because I was in this yesterday. It was like, I'm getting so much done. This feels so good. Yeah. And I've never called it or heard it called that flow state. But do you recognize when you're in it? Do you go, oh man, I'm in a good state right here. I'm getting a lot done. Then I'm going to set the timer. Like, do you feel
it's not until you just said that I'm getting a lot done. Right. So in the process of building, of moving, of writing, whatever it is that you need to do, I'm not aware that like, this is what's happening. It's only when like, well, that's done, moving on to the next one. You know what I mean? It's that little bit of feeling where you're like, I'm doing it today.
That was David Henry from episode 12 of the podcast. If you'd like to check it out, just go to the show notes, and that's where we have linked all of the guests that you are hearing today. I do have more tips, so many to choose from. We couldn't fit them in to just one episode. So we're going to continue this next week with some awesome productivity tips from some of the experts that have been on as guests here on the Natalie Tysdal podcast this year, 2021. So join us for that. I hope you have a super week, a happy week, and a healthy week. And I'll catch you next week right here back on the podcast.